Waitress comforts a crying boy by giving him her late son's toy. His billionaire father sees her kindness. What if a waitress, still mourning the loss of her son, offers comfort to a crying boy by giving him her late child's cherished toy, and, in doing so, she catches the eye of the boy's powerful billionaire father? Sarah Thompson, 28, moved through La Lumiere like a specter, her presence barely registering in the glittering chaos of Manhattan's finest restaurant. Her auburn hair was pinned in a tight bun, her black uniform pressed but worn at the edges, a silent testament to years of service. For 6 years, she'd been a fixture here, dodging entitled elbows and balancing trays with a quiet grace that made her invisible to the elite clientele. But tonight, her first shift back after a year of absence, every step felt like wading through molasses, the laughter of patrons, the clatter of silverware, it all clawed at the raw wound in her chest. Her son, Ben, had been 6 when leukemia claimed him. The memory of his hospital room was etched into her soul, the sterile stench, the relentless beep of monitors, the way his small hand clung to hers as if she could anchor him to life. Ben had adored What if a waitress, still mourning the loss of her son, offers comfort to a crying boy by giving him her late child's cherished toy, and in doing so, she catches the eye of the boy's powerful billionaire father, Mr. Snuffles, a tattered teddy bear with one missing eye, whispering secrets to it as if it could shield him from the pain. Sarah had buried a piece of herself with Ben, but months later, she'd found a second bear, smaller, more frayed, in a box of his belongings. It lived in her apron now, a talisman against the void that threatened to swallow her. La Lumiere was alive with decadence tonight. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over white tablecloths, and the air hummed with the arrogance of wealth. Sarah delivered plates of caviar and truffle-infused risotto, her smile a fragile mask. Her eyes, though, kept drifting to a corner booth where a boy, no older than 7, sat with his father. The boy's face was wet with tears, his shoulders trembling as he tried to stifle his sobs. His father, a man in a charcoal suit, was engrossed in a phone call, his voice sharp with authority. He didn't see his son's quiet despair. Sarah's heart lurched. The boy's eyes, blue, wide, brimming with loneliness, were Ben's eyes. Staring back from a stranger's face, she gripped her tray, nails biting into the wood. She wasn't supposed to interfere. Waitresses were meant to serve, not to meddle in the lives of patrons. But the sight of the boy, Daniel, as she overheard his father call him, shattered her restraint. She couldn't walk away. She approached the booth, her steps hesitant, her pulse pounding in her ears. Daniel looked up, his sobs softening to hiccups. His father, Richard Blackwell, didn't glance her way. Sarah knelt, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hey, sweetheart, what's wrong?" Daniel wiped his nose with his sleeve, his voice small. "My mom's gone. She left a long time ago. Dad's always busy, and I miss her." Sarah's throat closed. She knew that kind of missing, the kind that carved out pieces of you. Without thinking, she reached into her apron and pulled out the bear. Its fur was matted, its seams fraying, but it carried Ben's warmth. "This is Mr. Snuffles," she said, her voice cracking. "He's really good at making sad days better. Want to hold him for a bit?" Daniel's eyes widened. He took the bear, clutching it to his chest. His tears slowed, and a faint smile broke through. Sarah stood, brushing off her apron, her chest tight with a mix of relief and pain. She glanced at Richard, still on his call. Oblivious, as she returned to her duties, she felt a crack in the wall she'd built around her heart, unaware of the chain of events she'd just set in motion. Richard Blackwell was a titan. At 42, he helmed Blackwell Enterprises, a tech conglomerate that reshaped industries from Silicon Valley to Shanghai. His name was synonymous with power, his face a fixture in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. His net worth was a string of zeros that made most people dizzy. But beneath the tailored suits and steely resolve was a man fraying at the edges. His wife, Claire, had left 5 years ago, fed up with his obsession with work. She'd taken their warmth, leaving Richard with Daniel and a guilt that gnawed at him like rust. That night at La Lumiere, Richard had been navigating a high-stakes call with investors when he noticed the silence. Daniel's crying had stopped. He looked up. expecting sulking or defiance, but saw his son clutching a ragged teddy bear. His face calm for the first time in hours, Richard's gaze followed the waitress Sarah, her name tag read as she moved away. She was unremarkable, plain uniform, tired posture, auburn hair escaping her bun. Yet her act of kindness lingered, a spark in the cold machinery of his world. The next morning, Richard couldn't shake the memory. Sarah's gesture wasn't calculated, it was raw, human. He'd built an empire on precision, but this was something else, something he didn't understand, but craved. On impulse, he called La Lumiere and asked for Sarah. Her voice, when she answered, was weary, edged with suspicion. "I'm offering you a job," he said, cutting to the point, personal. "Assistant, better pay, flexible hours. You'd work directly for me." Silence stretched. "Why me?" Sarah asked, her tone sharp. Richard hesitated, unused to explaining himself. "You saw my son when I didn't," he said finally. "I need someone who sees." Sarah's mind raced. The offer was a lifeline her waitress tips barely covered. Her rent and Ben's medical bills still loomed like a shadow. But working for a billionaire? It felt like stepping into a lion's den, a world of glass towers and ruthless ambition. Still, something in Richard's voice, a crack in his polished facade, made her agree to a trial period. Sarah's first week in Richard's world was disorienting. His office, a glass fortress piercing Manhattan's skyline, was a hive of ambition. Assistants darted between meetings, their voices thick with jargon. Roy, KP is, synergies. Sarah felt like an imposter, her simple blouse and flats stark against the designer heels and tailored suits. She managed Richard's calendar, filtered his emails, and kept his coffee hot. But the distance between them was palpable. Richard was all business-focused, curt, a man who commanded rooms without trying. But Sarah saw the cracks. The way Richard's jaw tightened when Daniel's school called about a forgotten permission slip. The way he stared out his office window, lost in thought, when he thought no one saw. One afternoon, he asked her to pick Daniel up from school. She found him on a bench, his backpack dwarfing his small frame, his eyes downcast. "Hey, Daniel," she said, kneeling. "Remember me, the bear lady?" Daniel's face lit up. "You're Sarah." He hugged her, and Sarah's heart stuttered. She drove him to Richard's penthouse, a sleek space of marble and glass that felt more like a museum than a home. Richard was still at work, buried in a crisis. Sarah stayed, helping Daniel with his math homework, reading him a Spider-Man comic. It was easy, natural, but it stirred a deep-ache, a reminder of Ben's bedtime stories, his giggles. When Richard arrived, he found them on the couch, Daniel asleep against Sarah's shoulder, Mr. Snuffles in his arms. He froze, the sight hitting him like a wave. "You didn't have to stay," he said, his voice low. "I wanted to," Sarah replied, meeting his gaze. "He's a good kid. He just needs you." Richard's throat bobbed. He wanted to deflect, to retreat. But her words cut deep. He was failing Daniel, just as he'd failed Claire. "Thank you," he said, the words heavy. Over the weeks, Sarah became a quiet force in their lives. She wasn't just an assistant, she was a bridge. She reminded Richard of parent-teacher conferences, slipped notes about Daniel's soccer games into his briefcase. Richard began to share fragments of himself, Claire's betrayal, the late nights that cost him his marriage, the fear that he'd lose Daniel too. Sarah listened, her own grief a silent companion. She told him about Ben in pieces, his love for superheroes, the way he'd draw stars on his hospital gown, the hole his absence left. The shift came on a stormy Saturday. Richard had promised Daniel a trip to the aquarium, a rare day off, but a boardroom crisis loomed, a hostile takeover bid that could tank his company. Sarah saw Daniel's face fall, his small hands clutching Mr. Snuffles. She cornered Richard in his office, her voice firm. "Go," she said. "Your son needs you more than your investors do." Richard stared at her, torn. His instinct was to prioritize work, to secure his empire. But Sarah's eyes, fierce, unyielding, challenged him. He canceled the meeting, a decision that felt reckless but right. At the aquarium, he watched Daniel press his nose against the glass, marveling at jellyfish. They ate cotton candy. laughed at a clumsy penguin. For the first time in years, Richard felt like a father, not a CEO, when they returned. Daniel was glowing, a stuffed shark under his arm. Sarah should come next time, he said. And Richard's chest tightened. That night, he invited Sarah to a diner, a gritty place with cracked vinyl booths and burnt coffee. I want to know you, he said, his voice raw. Not my assistant, you. Sarah's walls went up. She felt the pull between them, the way his presence steadied her, the way their silences held weight. But love, it terrified her. I lost everything once, she said, her voice shaking. I don't know if I can do it again. Richard's eyes softened. I'm not asking you to jump. Just don't shut me out. Months passed, and their bond deepened. Sarah helped Richard rebuild his relationship with Daniel, teaching him to listen, to show up. Richard gave Sarah purpose, a reason to face each day. But her fear lingered, a shadow that grew with every moment of happiness. Loving again felt like betraying Ben, like erasing his place in her heart. One evening, while tidying Daniel's room, Sarah found Mr. Snuffles on the floor. As she picked it up, something crinkled. A folded paper was tucked inside, its edges worn. She unfolded it, her breath catching. It was Ben's handwriting, shaky crayon scrawls from his final days. Mommy, don't be sad forever. Mr. Snuffles will find someone who needs him. Love them too. Sarah sank to the floor, sobs racking her body. She'd never seen the letter, never known Ben had left this message. It was a gift, a permission to live. She showed it to Richard, her voice trembling. I thought loving again meant losing him, she said, but he wanted me to keep going. Richard took her hand, his eyes wet. You're not replacing him, you're honoring him. But their path was far from clear. Richard's world was a battlefield of scrutiny. His investors, his rivals, even his ex-wife's family watched his every move. When rumors of his relationship with Sarah surfaced, the backlash was swift. A tabloid ran a vicious story, Billionaire's Waitress romance. Pity or ploy? It painted Sarah as a gold digger, digging up her past, mentioning Ben's death in cruel, clinical terms. Social media erupted, dissecting her grief, questioning her motives. Sarah was blindsided. She'd kept Ben's memory sacred, but now it was fodder for strangers. She wanted to run, to retreat to the safety of her old life. But Richard fought for her. He held a press conference, his voice steady but fierce. Sarah Thompson is the strongest person I know, he said. She's not here for my money. She's here for my son, for me. If you want to judge me for taking so long to see what matters. The public's tide began to turn, but the damage lingered. Sarah doubted herself, wondered if she belonged in Richard's world. Then Daniel, small but fierce, climbed into her lap one night. Don't go, he said, clutching Mr. Snuffles. You're my family. Sarah's resolve hardened. She wasn't running, not this time. The complication came in the form of Claire, Richard's ex-wife. She'd been absent for years, living in Paris, but the tabloid frenzy brought her back. She arrived unannounced at Richard's penthouse, her designer heels clicking on the marble, her perfume sharp and expensive. I heard about your little romance, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Daniel deserves better than a waitress playing house. Richard's jaw tightened. You left, Claire. You don't get to decide what Daniel deserves. Claire's eyes narrowed. I'm his mother. I'm back now, and I want custody. Sarah felt the floor drop. She'd grown to love Daniel like her own, but Claire's return stirred old fears. What if she lost another child? Richard, too, was shaken. He'd failed Claire once. Could he fight her now? But Daniel's voice cut through the tension. I want to stay with Dad and Sarah, he said, his small hand gripping hers. The custody battle was brutal. Claire's lawyers painted Richard as a neglectful father, Sarah as an opportunist. But Sarah and Richard fought together, presenting a united front. Sarah's warmth, her bond with Daniel, shone in court. She testified about Mr. Snuffles, about Ben's letter, her voice steady despite her tears. The judge saw what Claire couldn't, a family forged in love, not wealth. Just as the custody battle faded, a new threat emerged. Richard's company faced a cyber attack. a sophisticated breach that exposed sensitive data and threatened to cripple his empire. The board pressured him to step down, whispering that his personal life, his romance with Sarah, was a distraction. Richard worked around the clock, his stress palpable. Sarah saw the toll it took, the way he withdrew, the way Daniel's smiles dimmed. One night, Sarah found Richard in his office, staring at a screen of red alerts. "You can't do this alone," she said, her voice firm. "Let me help." Richard shook his head. "This isn't your fight, Sarah." "It is," she said, stepping closer. "You and Daniel are my fight." Sarah Dovin, coordinating with Richard's team, organizing data recovery efforts. Her quick thinking and calm presence earned her respect among his staff, who'd once dismissed her as the assistant. Together, they traced the attack to a rival company, exposing their sabotage. Richard's board backed off, and his empire stabilized. But the ordeal revealed something deeper. Sarah wasn't just his partner in life, she was his equal. In crisis. The climax came at Daniel's 8th birthday, months after the custody battle and cyber attack. Richard transformed a park into a wonderland, bouncy castles, face painting, a magician who made doves appear. But Sarah made it magic. She baked a cake, a towering masterpiece of superheroes and sprinkles. She led games, her laughter drawing every child to her. Richard watched, his heart swelling. He loved her not as a savior, but as a partner, a woman who'd walked through fire and still shone. As the sun set, he pulled her aside, near a quiet grove of trees. "I've spent my life building walls," he said, his voice raw. "You tore them down. I want you with me, with Daniel. I want us to be a family." Sarah's breath caught. Fear still whispered, but Ben's letter echoed louder. She nodded, tears falling. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Their journey didn't erase the past. Grief was a companion, not an enemy. Sarah and Richard built a life together, one grounded in love and presence. They moved to a house with a yard where Daniel could run and play. Mr. Snuffles sat on a shelf, a reminder of Ben's legacy. Sarah started a foundation in Ben's name, helping families with sick children. Richard funded it, but it was Sarah's heart that gave it life. One evening, years later, Sarah stood in their kitchen, watching Richard and Daniel build a model rocket. Their laughter filled the space, a sound she'd once thought she'd never hear again. Richard caught her eye, his smile soft. "We're doing okay, aren't we?" "Better than okay," she said. Joining them, the rocket wobbled, then stood, tall, a small victory like their life. But the story didn't end there. One day, a letter arrived, postmarked from Paris. It was from Claire, softer than before. She'd been following Sarah's foundation, moved by its impact. "I was wrong," she wrote. "Daniel's lucky to have you." She asked to visit, to rebuild a connection with her son, not as a mother reclaiming him, but as someone seeking redemption. Sarah and Richard faced the decision together. It wasn't easy. Claire's return stirred old wounds, but they chose openness for Daniel's sake. The visit was tentative, awkward, but a start. Claire's presence didn't threaten their family. It added a new layer, a reminder that healing could extend beyond their circle.